I'm so excited, and I just can't hide it. Stick to Wrestling's about to start, and I'm getting so excited. My name is John McAdam, and I want to thank the Pointer Sisters for writing that song about their favorite podcast, Stick to Wrestling. Give us 60 minutes, and we will give you a wicked good podcast. Our summer series is going to continue very shortly. Wanted to bring up a couple of quick things. Bring in my co-host, Sean Goodwin. Sean, how are you?
Fantastic. I'll be even better in 5 minutes. Go ahead.
I'm sure you will be. 40 years ago this week, Pro Wrestling Illustrated, the first issue, came out. And wow, 40 years. I remember the day I went, I took my bike from North Attleboro, Mass to Plainville, Mass on a really hot summer day to buy it. And looking at it, thinking, wow, this is really good, because they had been advertising it in The Wrestler and Inside Wrestling, I'd say for a good 2 months before that. And pretty soon PWI took over as like the A magazine in the After series. Were you much of a magazine guy back in the day, Sean?
Not all of them, but that one, yes. And basically, I mean, they were so absurd. It was over the top. Even at my age of, 9 or 10, I'm sitting looking at this like, oh, this is just ridiculous. But I was there for the rankings and for like the lists. They'd have a guy's list of like the best championship or whatever like that. That's why I love the year-end issues. That, and I get to see what's going on in the other territories. As far as like the main stories, nah.
Oh, I would read the main stories because, if I spent $1.25 on a magazine, I had to read it cover to cover. But, the stories were absurd. I liked the rankings. I liked the names making news or the news section, whatever. Some of the columns were good. Like Dan Shockett's column was really good. But other than that, I agree with you. Now I have like a small stack of old After magazines that I still have. I can't even get through them. But, back in the day, I would buy and read all of them. And I am talking Pro Wrestling Illustrated, The Wrestler, Inside Wrestling, Sports Review, and then the quarterly releases. And The Ring, what was the Kaiser magazine that came out? I got all of them. It was absurd. But anyway, about a few months ago, we started doing a thing where if a wrestler had a birthday, we would mention the wrestler on the show. Just wish him happy birthday on the day that the show was released. And of course, as soon as I start doing this, no wrestlers were born on the day like that the show was released. They just wouldn't be born to make the life inconvenient for me. But all of that has been made up for, because really a legend is celebrating his 40th birthday on the day the show is released, August 15th, 2019. A happy 40th to Homeless Tom. So yeah, we wanted to wish a happy birthday to Homeless Tom. I don't have a personal favorite Homeless Tom match. I'm sure there are so many that it would be hard to do that. Sean did a big favor for me. He watched something. He watched about 60 seconds of something. It was the NXT show. As we know, this was SummerSlam weekend. They have 4 big NXT takeover shows during the night before the big WWF pay-per-views. And usually they are anywhere from really good to excellent. And I mean that. They're really good shows. Check one out. I recommend them. This past Saturday, the show was really good. And the main event was Adam Cole, the bad guy, against Johnny Gargano, the good guy. It was 2 out of 3 falls. One guy got to pick the stipulations for one fall. The other guy got to pick the stipulations for the other. And if this match goes to a third fall, as they always do, Commissioner Steven Regal was going to pick out the stipulation for the last fall. Well, the match gets tied 1-1. All of the lights go on, and this giant cage starts lowering itself from the roof onto the ringside area. And it's ridiculous. It's got like giant hammers and barbed wire and chairs and all this stuff like taped to the cage. So it's already stupid. And I'm saying to myself, okay, they must have dropped at least mid-5 figures to do this, and it's not going to bring in any money. Well, they have the match, and it's good. And I asked Sean to watch the last 60 seconds of this, and the last 60 seconds were absolute garbage. Sean, what did you see? Tell our audience what you saw.
Have you figured out yet why I was looking forward to the next 5 minutes finishing up quick. Yes, I was made against my will to watch this, and it basically in one little bundle in 1 minute wrapped up everything that I hate about the modern product. I'm usually open-minded. I usually will say, you know what, it's just different. It's not what no, I'm not doing that here. Okay, first of all, I turn it on, and the first thing I see is these two guys. Again, I'm glad you said who was the bad guy, who was the good guy, because I didn't know. Never seen either one of these guys in my life. They were on the ground, but I'm looking. I see the table in the middle, and they have these idiots. They have like 2x4s connecting the corners of the cage. And I'm looking up, I'm like, oh, I already see what they're going to do. I have seen, it's not even original. I have seen ECW between New Jack and Dreamer roll out this bit. You know, not together, but usually in some separate combinations. It was Dreamer with Brian Lee, Dreamer with, I think, one of the Dudleys. It was New Jack did it with Rocco Rock. And I'm like, oh, they're gonna run that stupid bit where they both fall off the cage. And yep, that's exactly what they do. They have it. They have a nice little platform there, so you know exactly what they're gonna do. It's not original. It slowed down the whole match. It put two guys in jeopardy when it just wasn't necessary. The announcer was terrible. I wrote down the quote, Morello. The only thing higher than these two is the intensity of this feud. Oh, shut up.
I think higher than these two is whoever came up with that idea, but go ahead.
Oh, you know he wrote it last night looking for this, you know. And again, that's what makes the whole thing so awful is that you know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's drawn out in front of you. You know what's going to happen. You say there's no surprise. There's no anything to it. The writer has, the announcer has his line written up ahead of time. The whole spot set up. You could see it about to happen. The match has to stop for this to happen. I mean, it's the that's everything that's wrong with the product.
Yeah, it's not everything, but it was the worst thing I've seen in a long time. Just to give everyone an idea, I mean, it's on WWE Network if you want to go watch it or just see this stupid spot. It's at the very end of the pay-per-view. They set up a table in the corner of the cage, almost like a scaffolding, and then they do a spot where they fall and they hit the table. Now, as bizarre as this might seem, hitting the table is important because the table has some give to it, a lot more give than the ring. And one of the guys, I think it was Adam Cole, almost missed the table. And if he didn't hit this, and I know how crazy this sounds, they're coming down from 15, 20 feet. If he didn't hit this table, he was going to be in big trouble, and he almost missed it. Here's the thing I don't understand. The Mick Foley Undertaker thing, I wouldn't have done it, but I understand why Vince McMahon okayed it. He's like, okay, Foley wants to do it, and I'm in the middle of a wrestling war. I'm fighting for my company's survival, so I'll do something dangerous, something that, really threatens.
I'll fight that one, too, because that was dumb, because it wasn't even within the course. The only one of those you can argue with is Michaels, when Michaels went off the cage, because that was completely within the context of the match. Yeah. Where he was desperately trying to get away from Undertaker. It was one spot. It wasn't. None of those spots made any sense. They started up in the cage. It was the whole match was stupid. It is 3 spots, and the rest of the match is garbage.
Right, and the thing is, now there's no wrestling war. And, your Vince is still, or whoever, it's at the end of the day, it's Vince. He's letting these guys do these things, and it's only a matter of time before someone gets seriously hurt. Yes. On top of everything, I can't imagine someone wow, I really want to see these guys fall 20 feet through a table. It's not entertaining.
And one of my notes is that, quote, John clearly has me watching this. No one's going to piss me off. When you're copying the dumb stuff of ECW, that's not the right direction. Now, I heard good things about NXT, so I was actually kind of like, oh, please don't be. But since you only had me watch 30 seconds, I'm like, okay, this has got to be terrible.
Well, you can watch as much as you'd like.
But I know, that's not going to happen. I'm going to get through 20 seconds and just get mad. So you got the exact point I had to watch. It's disheartening because I'd heard good things about this, and this is not. They're not heading in the right direction. None of this. It was 1 minute, and it was bad.
Yeah, I mean, they do way too many dangerous things on a regular basis. The show itself is good. The 4 specials a year are always really good, but it's like, geez, stop that. There's no reason for it. But on that pleasant note,
well, one last thing about this that kind of bothered me about you're right. Well, what was Cornette's line? He goes, "We used to try to make you think we're killing each other. Now we're trying to convince you we're not." It was something like that, and that is what you're presented with here, and that is exactly what that bit was.
Yeah, it was bad, but anyway, we wanted to vent about that, or at least I wanted to vent about it and at least have Sean know what I was talking about.
I was happy to wade in ignorance.
Okay, I will bear that in mind in the future. Sean, what about Stick to Wrestling's Facebook page?
Well, one of the conversations that we had is going to end up predating what we're going to talk about today, because a good part of our show is going to be about Patterson and the Patterson and Backlund feud, and we'd had a detailed, lengthy conversation about this very topic. So, I mean, sometimes we end up using topics we've seen that we see on the page. So not only is it a companion piece, but it also kind of predicts where the show's going sometimes.
Yeah, we're going to do WWF 1979, and then next week we are scheduled to do other promotions in 1979. But please, by all means, go to our Facebook page, Stick to Wrestling. It's easy to find. And you know what? This week, please share your favorite Homeless Tom moment.
Again, another one I would have been happy to wade in ignorance on.
But before I bring on our guest, I do want to let you guys know something. I've been meaning to do this for a while. We are going to end this show by me telling you why I am legally considered a pro wrestling expert, certified legally a pro wrestling expert. I will spill those beans for you by the end of this podcast. Now, we were talking about Facebook groups. I want to bring on a friend of mine through in another Facebook group, WWF 1970 through 1983. He is as enthusiastic about 70s WWF as I am. He is probably even more knowledgeable. Randy Barrier. Randy, thank you for coming on, man. I appreciate it.
No problem, John. That was just too nice of you. I don't know if I know as much as you do about WWF. I'm an expert on certain eras of it.
Okay. Well, I mean, same here. I mean, back in the day, this is summer 1979. I mean, right now, I get as much wrestling as I could ever watch. I get WWE Network. I've got DVDs. Back then, I don't know what it was like for you. I got 1 hour of wrestling on TV per week.
Yeah, it was basically the same then. But at that time, like I had told you earlier, I was out of it for a while. And if I remember correctly, I think it was because at that time, I wasn't too crazy about Backlund as a champion.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we're older now and I respect the man immensely. And I look back and I see what he did to get to where he was. But at that time, but a friend of mine got me back into it by getting us tickets for Patterson and Backlund at the Garden in the steel cage.
That I'll tell you, I envy you so much to have been part of that live. That is just incredible. So yeah, I mean, let's talk about the summer of 1979 WWF. Obviously, the apex of this is the Bob Backlund versus Pat Patterson feud. Starts off with Pat Patterson winning the North American title from Ted DiBiase. Randy, what were your thoughts on that when that happened?
I wasn't surprised because I wasn't too crazy about DiBiase, and I remember Patterson from years earlier from the magazines that he would team with Ray Stevens out in San Francisco. So I wasn't that surprised and kind of a little kind of liked it, actually.
You see, when I saw it, I thought, Now, Ted DiBiase had just come in wearing the North American title. That was his intro. And I was happy at the time. I'm like, oh, good, we need a secondary title. And then Patterson won it from Ted DiBiase on TV, where he used the brass knucks. And I kind of said, okay, all this title is going to be about is this backdrop for the Patterson-Backlund feud, or at least that's what I thought at the time. And obviously, I was wrong. 40 years later, the title is still around. Sean, any thoughts from you?
Why'd they change the name? What was the? Was it Mid-South? Was it a Bill Watts thing, or?
My understanding. Now, here's what happened. Patterson, maybe, I want to say 6 or 8 weeks after he wins the title, he comes on TV with this story. Even 14-year-old me was like, yeah, right. He won a tournament in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro, for the Intercontinental title, and he vacated the North American title to defend that title. And I do think it was because Vince Sr. finally, all of a sudden one day realized that there's a North American title down in Mid-South, and there's also a North American title out in Calgary, and there might have even been another one.
Wasn't Brazil also where Tarzan Tyler and Crazy Lou Graham, they also won a tournament there over the Bruiser and the Sheik, right?
In Rio de Janeiro? I did not know that.
Yes.
And of course, that's also where Buddy Rogers won.
That's correct.
You see, and you guys call him. I had no idea about any of this. Okay.
Oh yeah, Rio is the code that we just pulled this out of our ass and we're making this up as we go along. This is totally fake. That's like if anything's ever in Rio, that means they're just making it up. Don't you remember, John? One time on, I think it was Wrestling Classics, they had some kind of a thread all about booking the tournament in Rio for Rogers to win.
I missed that one, man. I had no idea we all had all these crazy fictional title matches. I know in World Class, Detroit was where they had their fictional tournaments where Roddy Piper and Bulldog Brower in 1985 teamed up and lost in the finals to some tournament there. That's like one of the craziest things ever.
I love Rio. Like a wrestling promoter is springing to send all his guys to Rio for an event.
Oh, sure. That's feasible. I had no concept of wrestling and money back in 1979, like how much things cost. But anyway.
Yeah, same here.
Pat Patterson gets an unprecedented 4 title shots at Madison Square Garden against Bob Backlund. Now, that always looked suspicious to me. And for years, me and Max Levy, Tamale, who's been on the show before, have wondered out loud, what happened there. Well, when Roddy Piper passed away, Dave Meltzer just kind of casually mentions, oh yeah, Roddy Piper was supposed to have a 2-match series against Bob Backlund at Madison Square Garden that got ditched for whatever reason. The story I heard was Vince McMahon Sr. took one look at Roddy Piper, who he had just heard about, and said, this guy's too small. But anyway, so Patterson was supposed to have a 3-match series against Backlund that turned into a 4-match series. And the one extra title match was taken by Swede Hanson. Randy, was Swede Hanson one of the worst challengers Backlund ever had, or was he the worst challenger Backlund ever had?
I don't know. It's a toss-up. You know what? I think I'll take Iron Mike Sharp over Swede Hanson. Yes. I don't know. Off the top of my head, I can't think of anybody who was a less appealing challenger than Swede Hanson. Although he had a rough and tough reputation in the NWA, it just didn't seem to show in the WWF. The WWF, I think, at that time.
It had just changed earlier, like that spring. They lost the extra W. But not to brag, I saw Bob Backlund against Iron Mike Sharp at the Boston Garden.
How was it?
I barely remember. It was all right. They wrestled in the Spectrum too, and it was an okay match, nothing terrible. But I finally figured out, the big question is, okay, why Swede Hanson? Why not just bring up Morocco a couple of years earlier, or just, basically anyone, Dick Slater, you name the guy, anyone but Swede Hanson? My theory is this, that back in the day, a promoter who's about to hire another wrestler from another promoter would call the promoter and say, hey, you know, I'm going to be bringing this guy in, Bobby Duncombe or whoever, in 4 or 5 months. Can you please finish him up? Because back then promoters had long-term plans for pretty much all of the wrestlers. My guess is that there was no long-term plan in the Carolinas for Swede Hanson, and he was just an easy guy to get. And okay, we'll get through this month of Bob Backlund and Swede Hanson. Sean, any thoughts?
Yeah, there are. Nor should there have been a long-term plan for Swede Hanson anywhere.
Work, and I did enjoy his work even back then. And I was surprised because I had read good things about him in the magazines. He was like a brawler.
Yeah, he was really old and out of shape at this point in his life.
Yeah,
I mean,
in the 60s.
He was a bigger deal in the late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah.
In the 60s, fine. Okay, but this guy in 1979, my theory is pictures of somebody. Because there is no way he should be anywhere near the top of a card at this point. I mean, I make the joke about him going to North Attleboro occasionally. But this is MSG. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I will take Iron Mike Sharp over Swede Hanson any day. And what credit does he have in the WWF? Okay, I get the Carolinas. He was a big deal back in the 20s. But, I mean, you know, what great history does he have in New York?
And I wonder – no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, he had none as far as I know, and they tried pushing him by having him administer the pile driver to multiple jobbers who went out on stretchers, and Frank Williams came out in a neck brace and said he was afraid his career was over, that sort of thing.
I'm trying to remember, was Swede one of those guys who did that like double-handed arm whip that all the guys from like, you know, the old Chicago TV days did?
He did that.
Oh, God. Okay. I know Piper was too small, and that was Vince's problem to get to the rest of the story part of it. But there has to be somebody better than Swede.
You know who that person was, and he was already like available. That person was Roddy Piper. They could have. Yeah. Piper would have been fine in New York in 1979. A year and a half later, he was the lead heel in Mid-Atlantic Wrestling. So you can't tell me 18 months earlier, New York was so different than Mid-Atlantic. It makes no sense. It was just a bad call on their part.
One quick thought about the Piper deal, John, is did the manager sabotage him?
Piper has claimed that. Piper has claimed that Fred Blassie put toilet paper in his bagpipe, and that screwed him up in his MSG debut. And that may or may not be true, but I think the story I heard was Vince just looked at the guy and said, look, I can't push him as a Madison Square Garden main event. He's too small for a heel.
Well, how big was he then? Because he was even smaller then.
Oh, he was way smaller than he was like when he got here in '84. But there's no question in my mind he would have been passable. Especially, look, this is Roddy Piper we're talking about. The guy could talk people into the arena.
It's better than Swede.
I remember a little bit at that time, remembering him, like he didn't do much for me as a fan then. So maybe that's part of it, because we know him more from his early 80s identity, which was obviously one of the best ever. But if I remember correctly, he bored me his brief time here in 79. But I don't know if I remember correctly from the magazines. I remember him, but it didn't tickle my fancy too much at that time, 79.
No, I remember reading about him in the magazines, like when he was in Los Angeles. He was the lead heel in some of the dying days, more or less, of Los Angeles. Yeah. But I mean, just by reading about the guy, I absolutely would have bought him as a main eventer. Maybe not a Morocco superstar Greg Valentine level main eventer, but certainly, I think he would have been like middle of the pack, and that's not an insult.
Right. And who knows, if they did go through with it, his star may have risen earlier.
Totally. Everywhere Roddy Piper went in his career, he started off as a babyface. He started off as a heel, and then he became a big-time babyface. Maybe that might have happened here, and that would have changed everything.
Yeah, interesting. Never thought about it like that. That's interesting.
Here's my problem with this theory, though, John, is that Piper had been there for a while.
Where for?
I mean,
Where?
in New York, he done MSG shows on January 22nd, April 30th, and also in July 30th. This is the first time you saw the guy?
Well, maybe he was jumping back and forth between California and New York, but that was the first time I remember seeing him. But before that, I just read about him in magazines.
No. I don't mean you, Randy. I mean Vince.
That's an excellent point. If he had been there January,
I excuse you, Randy. That's okay.
if he had been there January 79, then yeah, the Swede Hanson match didn't take place until October. So that kind of makes no sense that they didn't have time to put something together.
He even worked on a couple tapings.
Yes, he did. And to show you exactly, what this was summer 79, he went to a draw with Jose Estrada, who never won on TV.
Yeah.
Yep, he beat Steve King. I have him getting a win over Steve King. Yeah, a time limit draw over Jose Estrada. But I mean, it's to say that he just happened to see him and be like, "Oh, we can't use him." At the last second it's not believable. Was he that out of touch with his own business that he just saw this guy then?
I mean, if Piper was at Madison Square Garden January 1979, Vince Sr. saw him. Believe me, I know that much.
Yeah, because he would have been in with Frankie Williams on that date.
Okay. Ric Flair and I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, so didn't Vince also go back and forth talent-wise with California? So he would obviously be well aware of what Piper can do, at least out there.
Yeah, he did. I know Bob Backlund got sent out there at least a couple of times. But then again, Vince Sr. wouldn't have traveled out there, but Backlund could have come back with a scouting report, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, they had a good relationship with the Eatons.
Okay.
What?
All right. Well, there goes that theory kind of harpooned by Sean, which is a good thing. I mean, Dave said it, so I believe it. And it always, looked out of place until Piper passed away. God, was that like 5 years ago now? And Dave came out with that.
I'm thinking someone sabotaged him. I'm thinking someone sabotaged him. I think maybe not the way Roddy said it, but I'm thinking something happened behind the scenes. It's the only thing that makes sense. Because there's no way, and then you have to have a cover story for it. So there's your cover story.
Randy, who would have managed, in your opinion, who would have managed Roddy Piper?
Ooh, great question. I don't see him and Albano mixing together. I would think if the Wizard, only because the Wizard, managed another man who can basically handle himself, and that was Billy Graham. So I would say the Wizard, if he would have a manager at all.
Sean, what do you think?
I think the Wizard would be the choice because he was smart enough. Because Ernie was usually smart enough to know when to shut up.
Piper would be a better speaker than Blassie, so why would Blassie manage him?
Right, and Blassie would know when to stop.
Yeah, well, Ventura. Jesse Ventura complained about him being managed by Blassie because Ventura was a better talker than Blassie, but that's just the way it was up here. If you were a heel and getting a push, you were getting a manager.
Okay, but take Superstar Graham. Did Graham ever complain about Ernie?
No.
Yes. I actually just the other day watched an interview with him on YouTube, and at first he didn't like it, like, who is this guy and stuff. And then he realized after a while it worked. And
yeah, because Ernie didn't. Ernie knew the guy could talk, so he stepped back. That's why I think Ernie would get that job. He was good with those kind of egos.
Yeah, the way they did, I think the Grand Wizard would have managed Piper as well because Blassie he always had the geeks or the foreign guys, the Killer Khans, Fuji and Saito, Fuji and Tanaka. Albano was kind of a tag team guy and a freak show guy, and Wizard got the guys who were good, like, Morocco, Valentine, Piper. I think he would have wound up with the Wizard.
Lou was also the freak show guy because he had to talk for them.
You know what? That's an excellent point. The guys, the Samoans, perfect example. Guys who just couldn't talk. The Moondogs couldn't talk. It was part of their gimmick.
So
Lou was the best talker of the three.
Oh, absolutely. Lou. I will still say that if you every once in a while you put Lou in a main event, you get away with it. Not all the time, but every once in a while you can get away with it. And even if Lou's like filling in for somebody, I don't think there'd be a lot of complaints.
No. Never.
No, every 2 or 3 years, it was like a ritual. Lou Albano would have a singles match at the Boston Garden. It would land, go 4 minutes. He'd show everyone that, yes, I'm cutting myself. He'd run to the dressing room, and everyone would go home happy because Albano finally got his.
He not only would run to the dressing room, but he would run to the dressing room in the exact same way, which would be arms flailing the whole way, kind of swaggering and strutting. It's the same match over and over again, and it worked. It popped huge each time. You knew how it was going to end, and it didn't matter.
All right. More summer of 1979 in the WWF. I've never seen this angle. I read about it in the magazines. I heard about it the week after it happened. I don't know where I was on this Saturday morning where I didn't get to see wrestling, but they did an angle where Fred Blassie comes out with Nikolai Volkoff. He's being interviewed by Bruno Sammartino. There had been more than a few testy moments between Blassie and Sammartino, who was doing the interviews. For in the real world, he just wouldn't be doing them. They'd send Vince McMahon out there. But they do a show of strength where Volkoff is crushing apples with his bare hands. I'm sure those apples were as fresh as who knows. And the pieces of the apples got all over Bruno's suit. And Bruno, from what I understand, got hot about it, turned towards Blassie to go after him, and Volkoff attacked Bruno from behind. Randy, what are your memories of this brief Bruno Sammartino versus Nikolai Volkoff feud in 1979?
Again, that one, I vaguely remember it. Nikolai attacking Bruno, but I can't, I just vaguely remember that. But all in all, when you think about Nikolai Volkoff, Bruno was really the only feud that only program he ever had during our era up to 83, even as Beppo. Who do you see how do you remember Volkoff feuding with anyone else but Bruno during that time?
He did not. He did not have any straight feuds. I mean, he challenged Bruno for the belt. That's right. He never went after Morales. He went after Hogan, but that's after the era we're talking about. Yeah. And he never got that series against Bob Backlund, which is weird.
Right. Why? Why not?
I don't know. I mean, I do know Nikolai Volkoff in 78 came in under a mask as the masked super destroyer, and I have no idea why they did that when he's more marketable and effective as Nikolai Volkoff. But anyway.
Remember when he came in as the third executioner? Remember that?
I do. I did not know at the time it was Nikolai Volkoff, but I do remember the third executioner angle.
Right.
Sean, any thoughts? Bruno Sammartino versus Nikolai Volkoff in 79.
I'm about to go off on a tangent, and I'm going to feel bad about it later. I did not remember this at all, so I had to go look it up again. So in July 79 is the Apple incident, like you're talking about. About a month later, you had another incident where Blassie challenged Bruno to an arm wrestling match. Do you remember this?
I don't.
Now I know Blassie challenged on behalf of Volkoff.
Oh,
so yeah, that would be
okay. I was gonna say.
By the way, Blassie and Volkoff have one thing in common: they've never changed. I'm certain there's a third grade yearbook picture of Volkoff looking the exact same way he does there. Yep. He never changed. He always looks like he was mid-40s or whatever. But so they had like an arm wrestling thing, and of course it didn't go well because it never goes well. Blassie poked Bruno in the ribs, and there was another beatdown. So then you went to 8/27/79, and this was Backlund Patterson 3, and that was the first Bruno Volkoff match.
Okay, and I have a theory behind that you have Backlund Patterson for the third time without a stipulation. You might need something else to draw the crowd.
Well, another question about this. When is the last time? It's been a while for Bruno. I just want to ask two guys who were there. What was it like that Bruno was coming back? Did you guys expect him to come back? Or did you think he was gone? Or John, what do you
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, Randy, I'd like to hear what you thought.
Randy, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Sean. You mean his mid-80s comeback?
No, I mean like right around here, 79, because he lost the title to Graham a while ago, and he was announcing semi-retirement. So did you guys think he was going to come back again and wrestle, or did you think he was done?
I was happy to see him back. I loved it. I mean, that was amazing.
But did you think he was going to come back, or were you like, you just assume he's coming back at some point, right? Or you're like, wow, he's really gone.
Following, and then when I came back in '79, it was just about the time he came back. So don't remember. Yeah.
This might surprise you guys. I didn't even really realize he was gone. He hadn't been an announcer yet. He was almost never on TV unless he was doing an interview for an upcoming show. So I figured he just hadn't been on any Boston Garden cards. Then summer of '78, there's an edition of the Wrestler magazine where they're talking about Bruno's big comeback in a match in Asbury Park against Spiros Arion. That was a fundraiser, I think, for juvenile diabetes. And I kind of said to myself, wow, I didn't even realize Bruno was really gone. And by the time like that magazine was published or had come out, Bruno started making special appearances again.
It's now one. I hate to do this with Volkoff because he seemed like a very nice man, but he was what, about 330 pounds, legit.
I mean, he was a powerhouse. I want to get back to something you said. Like his appearance really did change. If you look at him in like '76, he actually kind of had long hair, and then when he came back in '79, he like shaved his head.
Yeah, I meant more just like the massive chest, and then. Yeah. But for some reason, he did not have the intimidation to me that he should have. And I don't know why that is, but I mean, like a Hanson would scare me way more than Nikolai Volkoff. He never really scared me that way. It was more kind of an amusement.
I mean, in '76, I swear to God, he looked like a beatnik. He had that hair and he had the beard mustache combo. I think there was always, despite the fact that, he was huge. He looked like he could, bench the entire gym. There was always he had kind of that like goofy face.
Yeah, he was scary looking and intimidating. But like you guys said, I don't think the Bruno Volkoff matches were Bruno's best work.
No, definitely not. I've always heard, too, that Volkoff got a lot of breaks in the WWF because he was legitimately friends with Bruno, and quite possibly, why they brought him back in '76. Koloff had just left, so that didn't make a lot of sense, and why they gave him this big angle in 1979. I remember the cover, I think it was of the Wrestler magazine, where it says "Million sob as Bruno is attacked on TV." They were never short on the drama, those guys.
But you can see how tempting it is. You see it on paper, and it's like, oh, this has got to just kill, right? And then it happens, and you look at it, it's like, it just, there was something missing for some reason. One more point before we go on to the next thing. I just wanted to, since we referenced it, the Patterson Backlund series, to make reference, these matches were great.
Oh yeah,
I mean, this was absolutely positively one of Bob's best guys. I would go as far as saying the best guy. They meshed perfectly. Pat knew how to work him perfectly, and I love that cage match. Randy, can you tell me about that being there?
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't remember a lot, but I absolutely remember being there. I remember where we were sitting. What stands out, it's funny how you can remember things. Like I can remember specific details of matches in '71, '72, maybe because I'm a kid and I'm more enthusiastic. But I remember them on the cage battling out. I remember saying, wow, because that was the very first live cage match that I ever saw. I remember the incredible electricity in the crowd. I remember.
Where were you sitting, Randy?
We were a distant away. It's not like when you're sitting across the entrance where you look up in the entrance, they're either entering on the opposite side of you or you're sitting on the same side where they're entering. It was neither of that. It was the opposite. It was one of the long ends of an oval at the Garden. If you remember, if any of you were ever there, it was, now I don't know if it was the left side or the right side, but we were at the long end of the loge above, like I would say right above the loge. So they weren't the greatest seats, but that's what I remember.
Well, you got to go.
But we got to go. A friend of mine got tickets, and I just remember I remember blood. I remember them on top, but I can't honestly say remember like anything else about that fight. Just the electricity, the construction of the cage. I remember.
Oh yeah, that was back in the day where it took a long time to put that cage up.
I miss that though, because there was something to that. There was something to kind of building the drama of the moment as you saw them building the cage. I don't know. It was one of those little things I kind of miss.
Yes, yeah. And as we know now, Vince was interviewing Debbie Harry during that time.
Yeah, that's right.
But I didn't know that then. We're just hanging out and talking.
Lead singer of Blondie, for those unaware. And yeah, they had just like completely busted out like summer of 1979. But anyway, big feud. In the spring, they have a big match on television between Greg Valentine and Chief Jay Strongbow with one of the coolest finishes I ever saw. The two of them collide in mid-ring and they fall unconscious. The Grand Wizard, in a panic, goes to the timekeeper's table and grabs a pitcher of water and pours it over Greg Valentine's head, reviving him. Valentine, for whatever reason, is in a hornety mood now, and he applies the figure four leg lock to an unconscious Chief Jay Strongbow, refuses to release it, and winds up breaking his leg. Chief Jay Strongbow is laying at ringside for about 3 matches afterwards, waiting for the ambulance. Albano and the Valiant are taunting him. As a kid, I thought this was hilarious. They finally take him out in an ambulance, and for weeks, Greg Valentine boasts that he has ended the career of the legendary Chief Jay Strongbow, which even as a 13, 14-year-old kid, I knew that meant he was coming back for the feud. When Billy White Wolf's career was ended, he was barely mentioned afterward. But Strongbow got talked about every week, and finally Valentine is wrestling in a squash match, and Chief Jay Strongbow comes through the crowd on crutches, his leg in a cast, and Valentine, in the words of Vince McMahon, looks like he has seen a ghost. Randy, your thoughts on what I've talked about so far?
That's what I remember most, is Strongbow coming out in the crowd, and that look in Strongbow's eyes. And he's staring at Valentine. I remember that more than the actual attack. And I also think that was one of the best feuds involving any wrestlers ever in the WWF.
It was funny because Strongbow had, at that point, was really stale. He had been around since spring of 1976, and he'd just been around too long without a break, and they give him this big feud kind of as a going away present, it looked like, because after this feud, he kind of disappeared. Valentine was around longer than Strongbow was. But, Sean, any thoughts on the Valentine-Strongbow, the build-up for the feud?
This was a carbon cutout, of course, of the exact same feud that happened, I think, 2 years earlier in Mid-Atlantic between Greg and Wahoo. Except the problem is Wahoo was way more over at this time than Jay was in New York. So I don't know again, this seemed like the standard. Monsoon must have broke out into a cold sweat when they told him they have a new way of doing that whole have the crap beaten out of Chief Jay to set it up for the title match bit that they've done every couple of years for decades. So once they came in and said, yeah, we did this thing with Wahoo, they must have been thrilled. Fantastic. But this was standard booking 101 for them. This is what they did. Let's see how many people have wiped out Chief Jay. It's you have Spiros Arian got him. Pia got him. Yeah, Pia got him. It's
Valiant.
It's cut and paste Monsoon booking.
You're right. But here's the thing. They went around the horn. First, they had the match where that goes all over the ring. The ref can't keep these two off of each other. And then they have a stipulation match. And by the way, they didn't do that too often in matches that didn't involve the champion, a stipulation match. They have an Indian strap match goes around the horn, Chief Jay Strongbow against Greg Valentine. And in every city, this ended in like a double count out or a double disqualification, which made no sense whatsoever. Both guys were on their way out, so either of them could have done the job, or they could have done just the typically dumb strap match thing where the babyface is hitting the corner and the heel doesn't know it. Randy, any thoughts on the actual feud itself?
Yeah, I like the strap match. I like those specialty matches. And maybe Chief wasn't the greatest worker, but he can sure get a crowd going. I'm sure Sean and you, John, you both saw that Spectrum match where in the beginning is that amazing stare down. Right?
Yes, I did see that, and it was really good.
Yeah.
I personally love the feud. You can hear the crowd loving it, and I thought it was a good series, and I enjoyed the strap match. I mean, and also I think what was very important, there was a lot of color in those matches, and I think very important.
Sean, any thoughts?
That was both off anybody, or that's big stuff. That's important, I think.
There's a reason why they did it over and over again, because it worked.
Yep.
So I mean, I'm not criticizing that harshly. I'm just saying this was what they did. I don't think it was anything. So they saw an opportunity to utilize Jay one more time in this role, and they couldn't help themselves. So God bless for everyone involved. But this was, how old is Jay at this point? Oh, no, one question about the beginning. Why was he on this? This is the one thing I remember about this. Why was he on the stretcher for that long? I remember him being
70s.
I remember him being on that stretcher on the floor for like 3 matches afterwards or something like that. I'm sitting there picturing some football game where the guy's outside in the snow waiting for the championship to finish. They just kind of left him out there.
I saw, this is not Stick to Wrestling, someone have an appendix attack on the street, and it took like 30 minutes for the ambulance to get there, just because the lines of communication were not what they are today.
I guess, but that's like the one thing I have to say.
Yeah, to me, that just added a little bit maybe to the realism, although you would think if we're having pro wrestling matches, maybe we'd have an ambulance standing by because things happen in pro wrestling, but who knows? But I want to talk about the return of the Valiant brothers. Ooh. Valiant were a huge success when they were in the WWF in like 74, 75. They main evented Madison Square Garden defending the tag team titles against Bruno and Strongbow, and there might have been another one. So we're waiting for them to come back. They finally return spring of 1979. They are a big part of the WWF in the summer of 1979. And then taking a step back, Jimmy Valiant was still in Memphis finishing up, and he said he was driving with someone, and Valiant said the guy driving him around was like, Jimmy, your eyes are like mustard yellow. You need to get to the hospital. And it turns out, what did he have, Sean?
Hepatitis.
Thank you. So with Jimmy not 100%, they bring in a new Valiant brother, which I have heard was originally going to be Steve Travis as Stevie Valiant. I don't know if that's true or not. He was going to dye his red hair blonde. But instead they bring in Guy Mitchell from Indianapolis. And he had the look. He kind of, I accept the fact that this guy's a Valiant brother, even though I knew he wasn't.
Let me jump in really quick. I have some background as to why Steve Travis was not the third guy. Okay. This is a good plug for the web, the Facebook page, because we had this very discussion with the always expert Bo James on this very issue, who is good friends with Jimmy and knows Johnny as well. So Steve Travis was going to be Jimmy and Johnny's guy. That's the guy they wanted, but they put Guy Mitchell instead, almost as Bo described, as a stooge. So a third guy to keep an eye on the other two Valiants. But Jimmy and Johnny wanted Steve Travis as the third role, but it was denied, and they got Mitchell instead.
Well, Mitchell was the only one out of those three that could work. I mean, he stood out as the guy who could actually do things in the ring. Ray, what are your thoughts on the Valiants being back in the WWF in 1979?
At that time, I wasn't a big Jerry fan at all, because I grew up at the time when the Valiants were during their prime, 74, 75. And I actually remember Jimmy's heel turn against, I saw it on television when he turned against Chief Jay Strongbow. So as I got older, and you see Jerry now, I appreciate his work more now. He had a great smile during the promos. But this version I wasn't that thrilled about, although except for Luscious Johnny. You can always, and he's a great seller. He's a great seller.
Yeah, I when they came on, it was a little bit like when Mil Mascaras debuted on WWF TV. He had gotten such a build-up in the magazines for me, and I finally get to see this guy that I'm dying to see, and I saw him the first time. I didn't think much of it. I'm like, all right, maybe next time. And it was like that. It just wasn't there with the Valiant brothers for me in 1979. That something was missing.
Jimmy.
Yeah, exactly, Jimmy.
But even when he was there, I never noticed that. Jimmy's
he was
not
there,
around.
but he wasn't. He was there, but he was a shell of himself at this point. He was clearly not right. Jimmy was absolutely the missing factor. Plus, he didn't look the same. He was he was smaller.
True.
And that was the missing. And in the ring, yes, we've all complained about Jimmy Valiant, but there is something about him that much like Chief Jay to an extent, there is just something about him and that crowd.
Yep.
You know what? Like I think we've all expressed, the Valiant brothers, it seemed like they were going to get a big push. They were going to be a big part of what went on in the WWF, and that kind of got scaled back a little bit. I'll tell you what, rather than move on to the next thing on this list, Randy, you saw the Chief Jay Strongbow getting turned on by Jimmy Valiant. Like, what happened?
I mean, it's amazing how you can remember some things as a kid. All I could visualize is Jimmy not turning his back and not tagging the Chief. And as a kid, I just remember disgust, shock as a kid, and he just was not tagging him. The next thing, I don't know what happened after that. I just remember Chief Jay being assaulted, and I think Beautiful Bobby and the Black Demon, who they were facing, I want to say they didn't get involved, but, that's so long ago, obviously, I can't be sure. But the one thing I do remember is, for some reason, Jimmy Valiant just turning around, looking at the crowd, half grinning, not tagging the Chief.
Now, did anything build up to that?
I don't remember any tension before that. I remember the building up to making the team popular. They had a promo video of Jimmy Valiant having dinner with the Chief at his home, and I think they covered that in the magazine too.
Yes. So
it's weird that they did those type of things that you would have seen in the 80s. And here it is, early 1971.
I was gonna ask you what year this was, because this is the exact same angle that they used to turn Peter Maivia.
Right. But I remember you guys, Sean, John. I know you guys remember the build-up. I can't remember anything like a week or two before if there was any tension. There could have been. I just don't remember it.
Talking about Backlund and Maivia, I started watching wrestling in 1975. It was October 21st, 1978 that I watched that on WOR. And so we're talking over 3 years, and I had never seen a turn in the WWF before that. So that's how infrequently turns used to be done on WWF TV, which, looking back is amazing. In the 80s, they couldn't go a week without someone turning.
True, but it's still almost like monsoon Mad Libs. It's funny. You can look at the booking situation, put Chief here to have this done to Chief, and then title shot from here, 3 at the Garden. It's just cut and paste, and it worked.
Yeah, it totally
at that
worked.
time, us fans, we don't know that at that time. So now we look back and see. No, I don't realize it, and
I didn't either. Which is so funny. I didn't either. It amazes me that this didn't dawn on me at the time.
What did you think when Maivia turned on Strongbow? What were you feeling when you saw that?
No, yeah, exactly. It worked. That's the amazing thing about it was they would have this very repetitive system, but no matter what, it worked.
I mean, to answer Randy's question, when my Via turned on Strongbow, it was like I was in New York visiting relatives. It was like 12:57 at night when the turn finally happened. I couldn't get to sleep until like 5 a.m. I was that jazzed. I am not kidding, man. I did not see the turn coming. I should have seen the turn coming because, and this is going to sound dumb, because my Via grew a mustache. He looked like a Bond villain, and it made no sense that Bob Backlund was now going after the tag team titles. So where else would this be going? But until they had that match against Ariane and Rivera, where the turn actually happened, there had been absolutely no hint that a turn was about to happen, and I was shocked and jazzed, man. I couldn't wait to get back to North Attleboro, Massachusetts, and tell all of my friends that Peter Maivia, happy-go-lucky Peter Maivia, was now a bad guy. But anyway.
Well, hold on. I have to interrupt you here, John, because it is that time of the show.
That's what I was getting to.
It is time for our special segment. John, how are you, a certified pro wrestling expert?
From a legal perspective, I am a certified pro wrestling expert. This happened in 2001. I had my old website up, and there was some stuff about Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and Doug Furness had brought his younger brother, Mike Furness, into Smoky Mountain. Now, Mike was a really good athlete. He was good enough to be a starter on the defensive line, I think it was the defensive line at the University of Tennessee. Now, if you're a starter in the SEC, you're good, okay? No questions asked. Well, Mike wants to become a pro wrestler. He forms a tag team with Doug. They are feuding with the Heavenly Bodies. Mike is the most clueless wrestler I have ever seen in my life. It's like he's totally out of it. Jim Cornette, they do an angle where Jim Cornette hits him in the back with a tennis racket, and Mike kind of looks confused. He's like, why is this man hitting me with a tennis racket instead of selling it, right? So he's showing no coordination or athleticism whatsoever. It's pathetic. It's like, you think, okay, well, we've got something. He used to play college football right here in Knoxville, and it's like he couldn't even get out of the blocks. He was, completely clueless, and I let my disgust for Mike Furness be known on my website. Well, one day I get an email, and it is from an attorney in Knoxville, Tennessee. Mike Furness has been in a car accident, I learned, and he is suing for millions of dollars on the grounds that he would have been the next Stone Cold Steve Austin or The Rock had he not suffered this car accident. And he's going after like major money. And this law office is like, you seem not to have such a high opinion on Mike Furness. If push comes to shove, how much would it cost us to fly you to Knoxville, Tennessee to testify in this case, and you will be our expert legal witness? So there you have it. I am a certified pro wrestling expert. I would have been brought onto the stand to testify under oath with my expert opinion. How about those apples?
Very nice. Wow.
I can put it. It's what you can be. That could be your legacy. I'm a legal wrestling expert.
I mean, it would have been pretty cool to be flown to Knoxville, and it would have cost.
You should hang out your shingle as an expert. You could you hire out your services. There are enough wrestling lawsuits today. You could have a little side gig going on here.
Yeah, I gotta put up a new website and trash the right wrestlers who have gotten into car accidents and are looking for millions of dollars because, hey, I would have been the next Steve Austin. But anyway, Randy, thank you for coming on, man. This has been an excellent show.
Oh, wow. Thanks a lot. Thanks for inviting me, guys. I had a great time. I could go on for another couple of hours.
Well, you might have to someday because we're going to ask you back. Sean, thank you for everything. Thank you for everything you do for this show. I want to thank everyone for listening. I hope it was an enjoyable hour. I especially want to thank our producer, Lou Kippelman, for all the work he does. And this podcast has been a product of the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network. We will see you next week.